Okay, think about this for a second. How do you get to a doctor's appointment? For a lot of us, right, you just hop in the car. But what if that wasn't an option? For millions of people, it's a huge barrier, sometimes an impossible one. Today, we're going to look at the story behind what's called non-emergency medical transportation and how it's so much more than just a ride. It's often the very first step toward getting better. And this quote, this really says it all. It's from Joaquin Torres, the owner of a company called TLC Mobile Health. We're not doctors, we're not psychiatrists, but we are the first step to recovery. Wow. That just perfectly sets the stage, doesn't it? It reminds you that healing, it doesn't always start inside a clinic. Sometimes the real work, the most important work, is done by the person behind the wheel. All right, so let's jump in, and we're going to start with Joaquin himself. He tells this story about a call he got for a patient who needed a ride to a behavioral health appointment. Sounds simple enough, right? But here's the catch. The man had been flat out refusing to go. And this was way more complicated than just, him changing his mind. And this is really the core of what Joaquin does. He knew, instinctively, that this wasn't just a scheduling issue. It wasn't a logistics problem. It was a trust problem. The real challenge, the human challenge, was how do you show up for someone who feels like the whole world has given up on them, maybe even like they've given up on themselves? So Joaquin's story, it's really powerful, but it's not a one-off. It actually points to this massive and honestly often invisible gap in our healthcare system here in America. So let's zoom out for a minute and look at the bigger picture of what we're talking about. Non-emergency medical transportation, or NEMT for short. Yeah, you're seeing that right. Millions. Every single year, millions of Americans either miss or have to delay getting medical care for one simple reason. They don't have a ride. And listen, this isn't just some small inconvenience. This can lead to way worse health outcomes, and it often means more expensive emergency care down the road. It's a huge problem. And if you look at where the need is the greatest, it's in behavioral health. I mean, check this out. It is the #1 reason people use these NEMT services. And with a growth rate of over 10%, it's crystal clear that for people who are struggling with their mental health, just having a reliable ride isn't a luxury. It's a vital, vital part of their treatment. And, the money follows the need. The market for these services is already huge. We're talking over $9 billion this year. And look where it's headed. It's projected to shoot up to almost $14 billion by 2030. So this isn't some tiny niche industry. This is a massive and still growing part of our healthcare system. And that growth just reflects how deep this need really is, all across the country. Okay, so you see this huge systemic problem. The question is, how can one person, one company, even begin to make a difference? Well, let's circle back to Joaquin Torres and his really personal, human-first approach to all of this. So get this. When Joaquin bought his company, he made a very specific choice. He renamed it TLC Mobile Health. Why? Because TLC stands for Tender Loving Care. He says, it's not like jumping on a plane for vacation. It's going to dialysis or some other serious health issue. That name, it's not just marketing. It's his whole mission statement. It's a promise. But how do you actually deliver on a promise like that? Well, for Joaquin, it starts with the very first phone call. The tone of that call sets the stage for absolutely everything that follows. And from there, he personally interviews every single driver. He's not just looking at their driving record, He's looking for their humanity. He's looking for people who get it, who have empathy. And this quote from him really drives it home. I feel that the way you intake the call reflects on you as a human, the caring part of the business. See, for him, this business isn't about vans and logistics and schedules. It's about human connection. The caring part, that is the business. All right, now remember that patient I mentioned at the very beginning? The one who kept refusing his appointments? This is where it all comes together. This is where we see the real tangible impact of this TLC approach in a moment that Joaquin calls the $1 million hug. Okay, so picture this. The man was in a wheelchair and he was in really bad shape. Cancer was just ravaging his body. But honestly, it was the despair that was winning the fight. He was ready to stop treatment. He was ready to give up on everything. So what did Joaquin do? He didn't just check a box that said refused service and move on. No, he did something an algorithm or a big corporation just can't do. He kept calling. He kept physically showing up. He gave this man the one thing that no doctor could prescribe, Just persistent, unwavering belief in another human being, even when that person couldn't believe in himself. And because Joaquin kept showing up, the patient, he kept going to his appointments. He got the treatment he so desperately needed. And then one day, Joaquin goes to check on him, and the same man who had been completely confined to a wheelchair, he was walking, on his own. And the patient, he gave Joaquin this huge hug and said those words. Just imagine hearing this. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here right now. For Joaquin, that one single moment of connection, he says it was worth more than $1 million. That's the real bottom line. That's the true measure of success. So this incredible story, it's not just about one driver and one patient. It really pulls back the curtain on a profound truth about what healing actually means, and maybe more importantly, where it all begins. And that brings us to the biggest takeaway here. The most important life-changing work in healthcare, it can happen long before a patient ever even sees a doctor. Sometimes recovery doesn't start in a sterile clinic. It starts with a simple, reliable act of caring, a phone call, a familiar face, a safe ride. It starts with someone who just shows up. And it leaves us with this pretty fundamental question to think about, right? We focus so much on the treatments, the medicines, the cures, but what about the journey to get that care? As we've seen today, sometimes that journey is the most critical part of the treatment itself. So I'll leave you with this. Where does healing truly begin?